Folks, life is what you make of it. Welcome inside the Paris Sea Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show. Comedy on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live. Download our free app to your smartphone and stream all of our live local programming, including Solomon on Blast, the Jim Parisi Show, and yours truly, the Jake Feinberg Show. Can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today, and it's just a high honor to be able to continue my trek through the regionalism of music in this country. I've been trying to track this cat down for a long time. He's a decorated guitarist and singer and an amazing record producer as well. Not even really doing justice to it, but we're going to get into it today. Johnny Lee Schell, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jake. I enjoyed being had.
Absolutely, brother. It's an honor to connect with you. Listen, I just wanted to start. I didn't know why. I mean, I've done over 1,000 primary source interviews with your generation, and I was transcribing this interview yesterday, and I didn't know why until this gentleman said this, and I want you to take a listen to it. Very quick audio clip, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
Okay.
It's not so much touring prolifically. I had a 6-night-a-week job in a beer joint, and 3 of those nights were at after-hours joint till 5 in the morning.
In Los Angeles?
In Fort Worth, Texas.
I know that was a quick one. Did you gather who that might have been?
Was that Delbert?
It's the old wily veteran Delbert McClinton. Very good, Schell.
Yeah.
So this is what I want to talk to you about. I need you to talk to me about the beer joint gigs that you had before full interconnection. You're in the Fort Worth region of Texas, right? That's where you came from.
No, I came from way up in the Panhandle, up by Lubbock and Amarillo, up in there. Actually, I'm from a little tiny town called Farwell, Texas. It's right over by Clovis, New Mexico. So, fortunately for me, I missed out on most of the slavery of the beer joint gigs.
You said fortunately. You said fortunately.
I did play a few, but not that many. By the time I was old enough to get by, to pretend to be 21, I was already in sort of regional bands playing out, mostly little concerts, maybe like a National Guard Armory or a Moose Lodge or that sort of thing. So I didn't have to suffer doing those gigs that Delbert's talking about, although that's a very good learning area. You get to hone your musical skills because you're just playing hours and hours on end. You got to come up with ideas and refine the way you play your instrument or how you sing. It's just the long hours are sort of tough.
I mean, this is really important.
A lot easier.
No, I mean you avoided the slavery. I mean, the thing is that Delbert, there were cats like Cornell Dupree that were playing together. I mean, and the entire front row was all guitar players. On top of the fact that you were just like spinning around, 1 set on, 1 set, 4 sets, 5 sets a night. But explain exactly how you kind of leapfrog that into the Moose Lodge circuit.
Well, I just started playing. I started playing guitar when I was 13, and about 3 or 4 months later, I was already in a band, and we were playing like high school dances and that sort of thing, And then when I got out of high school, I was going to college and in Portales, New Mexico, Eastern New Mexico University. And we played, college gigs and all that sort of thing. There was the whole county that city was in was dry at the time. There were no beer joints. There was nothing. Eventually Curry County, New Mexico, became lit, and there was 2 or 3 clubs there. The Fireballs played in one. They were a local band, Jimmy Gilmer and the Fireballs, because Clovis, New Mexico was where Norman Petty's studio was.
Wow.
who recorded Buddy Holly's stuff, and I met him when I was 16, and he became like a second father to me. Taught me all about recording and all that, and I was fortunate to have a studio 9 miles from my house where someone had recorded major hit records. So I didn't have the excuse of, oh, we're here in the middle of nowhere, woe is me, we can't do anything, because right there in front of us was somebody who already did it. And so that gave us a different perspective of thinking that we could actually accomplish something if we put our mind to it.
Johnny, this is interesting. I wanted you to talk about, well, here's the thing. The old guy at Chess Records, Johnny Malo, he's the head engineer for Chuck Berry and Howlin' Wolf and those cats. And
right.
I was talking to a drummer, and I want you to relate this to the cat that was your mentor in the recording business. This guy, David Kemper, this great studio drummer, he said, what the old guys would do, they would set up a room full of musicians. They'd see who needed more bass or more treble in their guitar amp. They did it to sound great in the room, and then they would mic the room instead of micing individuals. That's the way they heard it.
Well, David's a good friend of mine. And, it's just you've got to remember that the tools that early engineers had at their disposal were very limited. They may have had a console that had I believe Norman's console had 6 inputs, and he was recording into maybe 2 tracks. So they had to put those 6 microphones wherever they did the most good, Mm-hmm. Maybe they might be able to afford 2 microphones on the drums, maybe not, maybe 1. They've got to decide, depending on how many people are playing, where the microphones are they've just got to do trial and error and listen. And because they're actually mixing it as it's going on to the tape, there's no mixing afterwards. And so when there's, in the middle of the song, when there's a guitar solo, he's sitting there with a knob, the engineer is, and he's riding the guitar solo up just a bit and then putting it back, and
wow.
And the reverb's going on, and you can't take it off, and if somebody blows the ending, well, you could feasibly take a razor blade and splice a different ending from a different take on it, but not like we can do now with digital recording, where you basically copy and paste the music as if it were a word in a document.
Could you talk, I forget, Norman, what was Norman's full name again?
Norman Petty.
So Norman, what were the techniques, throwing away all the Pro Tools and because I know you still have the Western black and white cinema going on in the studio with the TV next to you, and you're keeping it as authentic as possible. But
yes, we still all record together at one time. Of course, we do overdubs normally. The horn sections and the backing vocals and the stuff that we call sweetening is usually added after the fact. But all the rhythm track guys play together. The bass and drums, guitars, keyboards, all that kind of stuff. And when we did Taj Mahal's Maestro album here, Taj was singing live in the corner, and the horns were playing as well. So we're keeping that spirit of the old school way of thinking about it, where we don't think like, well, let's put down a click track and we'll have the drums play to that, and then we'll add everything else. We don't usually build tracks like that. We normally just play them all together because of the energy between the musicians and sometimes the happy accidents that happen along the way that wouldn't happen if you're just overdubbing a part, and you can go back and do it 50 times if you want to,
Can you give an example of a happy accident?
Well, they're usually just small things that happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't give you a specific thing, but it might be changing your rhythm, because I might say changing my rhythm guitar because of the way the keyboard player's rhythm is playing, and we're not talking about it. We're just listening to each other and playing off each other, you know. And I play with Mike Finnegan so much that I basically know what he's going to play before we start tracking.
Did you, I mean, you're bringing up wet and dry places. I mean, Finnegan, the old boys from Kansas region, was pretty dry for a minute. Did you know the old Finnegan, the old boy Finnegan back in the day?
No, I didn't in Kansas. I was playing in a regional band from Texas, and we played in about 30 states, and Kansas was only one of them. No.
What was the name of that group?
We were called Baby.
Oh, Baby. Okay, that was Baby. Yeah.
We were a Texas boogie band, basically, 2 guitars, bass, and drum.
Wow.
And
well, that's what we let in with. That was, but I mean, yeah. I mean, but Finnegan, like, okay. So go ahead. You were on. Would you say it was the? Would you say it was a Chitlin circuit?
Well, we made it better than that because the way we operated, and that was in the 70s, we had a production company. We had a big truck that had a full stage, all the backline, lighting and sound, and 3 road crew. We had a poster crew that went and put up posters in the towns about a month ahead, and then went back again about a week before because the kids would take them down for souvenirs. And we advertised on KOMA. We advertised their own gigs and rented the halls and took all the profit. So it was much different than a Chitlin circuit. It was all basically teenage dances and concerts, but it wasn't a Chitlin circuit because we didn't rely on local promoters in general to book us.
It's so fascinating. I mean, talking to Johnny Lee Schell here live on the Jake Feinberg Show. Going back to Norman Petty for a minute. I mean, so could you talk about one of the most, like, how he was able to, with limited technology, create such a warm sound? I mean, the fact is, I mean, maybe they only had 6 mics. So, I mean, now...
Right. I think his early console had 6 inputs. By the time I came along, which was probably in the late 60s, they then had a 4-track recorder. And they still had the same console, which was only 6 inputs. But that way you could put one mic on the bass or else have the bass come in direct. And you had one on each guitar amp, and you could have one for the vocalist, and you could have, then that would leave you 2 or 3 microphones left over for the drums. And then you had the luxury of even putting the drums on a track by themselves and splitting up the other instruments however you felt like. Of course, now we have 150, 200 tracks. We can do whatever we want, but part of the talent was envisioning where things are going to go, who's going to play what, and how it's going to get recorded, where the signal is going to come from and where it's going to end up, and then having it sound balanced and live. And he had a nice sounding room that he'd had built there, and he was an excellent engineer. He had perfect pitch. He was also a good keyboard player, and his wife Vi was a concert pianist. So on songs like Every Day, that's her playing the Celeste part on that. Dun 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 dun, stuff like that. Wow. And she wrote out all, for publishing, she wrote out all the notation for all the songs because she was the only one around there who could read music.
So, I mean, you say we were trying to keep the spirit of that alive.
Well, that just means getting everyone in the same room all at the same time and bouncing off ideas like, well, we think after that solo there should be another bridge there, because these artists bring in songs, and basically the Phantom Blues Band is also a rhythm section that plays with lots and lots of outside artists, and they come here to my studio because they want the camaraderie of the band. They want the sound of that band and the people who are playing in the band to be. They've heard what we've done before and how it turned out, and they want to have that same kind of thing. So they bring in songs, and some of them are finished all the way. We may need to change a few things, like for example, adding a bridge after a solo, or taking something out, or changing the order of the sections of the song, or maybe helping finish out the lyrics or whatever. But there is some moving around place before we start playing, and all that, and that comes from experience.
Well, that's what I was. So it's what is it? Hutchinson, Brown, Nagel, and Finnegan is the rhythm section. Who's in the rhythm section?
No, it's Larry Fulcher is on.
Oh,
bass.
Fulch! Wow, what a
Yeah,
great. So I've interviewed. I've actually Hutch has been running for me a little bit, but we'll get to him. But Fulcher.
Yeah, Hutch lives 2 blocks away.
Oh, he does. You just get him by the coattail. Say we got a hat full of things to go. but no, you know that he knows. But so here's the thing, Johnny. You're talking about experienced cats that have been in the studios before the evolution of this digital age. So how do you try to instill that spirit with my generation, Gen Xers and millennials, who are more insecure, more uptight about perfection, and less understanding of the climate that you guys, whether it was Baby, or whether it was the Jerry Hahn Brotherhood, or whether it was Little Feat. I mean, the fact of the matter was that you basically, those cats, it was before the efficiency model came in. You basically, you did a lot of first takes. You just cut it, you burned, you had to hit it, and you didn't get all caught up in obsessing about a solo and listening to it over and over again, because you had to move on to the next gig or the next album. And that's kind of our issue now in my mind, is that this supply and demand thing where people hang on to their creations now because they don't know the next time they're going to be able to get to it.
Well, sometimes it's a matter of knowing when you've done something good. Both musicians and singers and everyone, that's one function of a producer, is to try to figure out when this is good. This is what we wanted, and we should stop now and go to the next song. We've got 10 songs to record in 3 days or whatever, and it's not that we're cutting corners or sacrificing or settling. It's we've got to decide that this is good, or no, we don't quite have it yet. We've got to do another couple of takes, and those sort of decisions are usually made by the producer, except in the case of the Phantom Blues Band, it's usually majority rules. If one guy feels like he didn't quite hit it, then we'll do another take for that person, even though he could overdub to what we've just done.
But you're all going to do it together again.
Yeah, or if we feel like we've done a great take and there's just a couple of clams in there that we can punch in, that maybe the bass player played a wrong change or whatever, then we'll just go back and fix those little things, and then we'll have a take. And you would have done that anyway in the days of multi-tracking on tape. As soon as they got 8 and 16 and 24 track machines, even if you had a take that had some mistakes in it, you would just go punch those mistakes in if the guitar player played a wrong chord or whatever. Normally in those days you wouldn't punch the drums in, but we do that very often now.
How do you get younger cats to know that they've done something good if they, could you give an example? You don't have to mention any names, but I mean, how do you get them to,
you just tell them.
Right, because
you just tell them.
Yeah.
So you say, no, look, that's good. Don't waste your time chasing your tail. You've done something great, so let's move on. We just had Nick Schnebelen in here, and we're doing his solo album, and we don't have to do a lot of that with Nick. If we say it's good, then he says, okay, that's it,
Right.
Because some people come here and they trust our judgment, and that's one reason they come here.
You referred to your band, Baby, as a boogie, Texas boogie band. Can you talk about some of the influence? I remember the late great John Abercrombie, the great jazz guitarist, or just guitarist in general. His first real gig was with Johnny Hammond Smith, the B3 player, and Johnny had this interesting way of sort of, he'd teach you the tune, but if you didn't start to get it right away, he'd start yelling at you a little bit. But basically what Abercrombie was saying is that as a guitar player, if you didn't have rhythm, then you weren't going to get a gig. You needed to have good rhythm. And I'd like you to talk about how Johnny Lee Schell developed your internal rhythmic time feel.
Well, I think it's one of the best attributes I have as a guitar player is feel and time. And I became much better at it when I started playing with really good drummers. And when I was playing with bad drummers, I was always uncertain. Whenever they did a fill, they were going to come out and be on top of it. And I was trying to play extra strong to avoid that happening. And then once I played with Ricky Fataar in about 1981, then thereafter everything sort of like that. I said, oh, I don't have to worry about that anymore. I'll just play, and I'm very careful never to play on what we call on top, which is that pushy thing where the guitar is playing ahead of the beat.
Mm-hmm.
You got to lay back and be down in the groove. And once I learned that, then a light bulb went off, and then I do my best never ever to do that again. And that includes playing rhythm and playing solos.
Well, that's that push and pull can be very toxic for authentic music. But I mean, can you talk about? You didn't play with any good drummers before '81.
No.
But I mean, like
I played with some good younger drummers when we were teenagers. I probably just didn't notice it as much,
But I mean, like Baby
and,
was around for a minute. I mean, did you know?
I spent 8 years in that band. It didn't really dawn on me until I started playing with other drummers how great these guys were, and it was just like having a little safety net all around you. I could lay down and make the groove be twice as wide.
But I mean, I guess maybe to the point is that you're not giving yourself enough credit for the fact. I mean, when I interviewed Julian Priester, who played with everybody, M1 Dishi band, and he played with Sun Ra. Sun Ra would point to him as a trombone player. He had to have his own internal time feel, and it allowed the drummer. It freed the drummer up to be able to play the song, to play the tune, play melodically on the kit. And like, did you, like, how did you? Even though maybe you weren't aware of it, was it bandstand experience and playing upholstered sewers, as Finnegan would say, that allowed you to that allowed your ears to grow? Because listen, I mean, okay, you finally got to a point where you moved to the West Coast. You're like, wow, I'm playing with some cats now. Like, this is the real deal. But before that, I mean, how did your ears grow the most so that you were able to maybe keep time better than the drummer did?
Well, I don't know. It's just like it's a feel thing that some people just seem to have, and it's not. And once you recognize it, it's really very obvious. I have people who come in here, even sometimes experienced players, and they cannot play in the groove. And I'm shocked by it, to tell you the truth. And I see it time after time. I don't know if they've played so long they're not paying attention anymore, or they can't concentrate, or what the deal is. But I've seen even some experienced players that I was shocked at how inconsistent their time was. And for me, that's like the kiss of death in the studio.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, so you say in the groove, and they're just sort of being like, they're just wanking it, or are they just like flying?
No, they're playing ahead of the groove.
They're playing ahead of the groove, and they're not even aware of it, or they can't settle down?
They're not aware of it, or they don't hear it, or I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I'm flabbergasted. I don't understand it at all.
But I mean, okay, so Johnny Lee, let's just break it down, because this is so we are. I have been on this trip for 6 years. One of the L's of my program is leadership. We're hearing all sorts of stuff about formal leadership versus moral leadership on a global level, just lacking. And here you are, Schell, in the studio, and some quote unquote experienced cat who's got awards and he's been around the block, and he's got an ego to boot, and he's not in the groove, and you're flabbergasted. Talk to the peeps about how you deal with that on a person-to-person basis. Do you get upset?
Well,
because this is important for leadership.
No. Now with the tools we have, I just take note of it and fix it when it's done.
You fix it.
Yeah, I'm moving back.
If you didn't prior to the smorgasbord of tools, could you talk about a time? Maybe it was with.
We did. You say, man, you hear that text? Don't hurry it along. You got to lay back in time. I have no qualms about saying that to any musicians.
Right.
We had a very well-known guitar player come in. He's an English guy. I won't say any names, but his initials are EC. And we were doing a Todd Mahal session. It was Lover with a Feeling, and it has those breaks. Then I'll go home. Down, 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 down. Every single one he was ahead on. And because our rhythm section is from Texas, we sort of hear things on the backside, and we had to hip him to the fact that it's going to be a little more laid back, and to remember how it used to be playing with the Tulsa people.
Wow! Oh, so the Jimmy Lee Keltners and the Carl Radels. And,
because most of us guys of that ilk sort of hear the pocket in a different spot. And I'm only talking milliseconds here.
Hey, listen, man, this is where the Jake Feinberg show lies in the milliseconds. That's where the nuance is. But when you're talking, Gradney was the first cat, and I interviewed Gradney for the first time 3 years ago, and he was like, he dropped this name, Johnny Lee Schell and Tony Brownnagle. He calls them the Texas Contingent. So how much of that back of the beat, behind the beat, comes from, they're like Brownnagle's got a book out, or he's supposed to be getting a book out sometime in his lifetime about all the different shuffles. How much of that?
Well, I think it's sort of ingrained in your DNA.
It's a gene thing. It's a gene thing.
Yeah, you sort of like it's a regional sort of water that you drink, where you're sort of in general more of a laid back person anyway.
Right,
you're not all fidgety and fiddly, and you want things to feel comfortable. You want to be like J.J. Cale. You don't want to be like a speed metal band or something. You know what I'm saying?
I dig. So okay, so here's the thing. There are a lot of cats that I talk to, or I've read interviews with people, and they're like, they really didn't know when it was their time to solo how to improvise. And you talk about really connecting with the real cat drummers in the early 80s, but two-part question. Can you talk about the Johnny Lee Schell definition of improvisation, and then also how did you learn to improvise over the rhythm section?
Well, to me, you just got to feel comfortable and confident when you're going to play a solo, and and I usually approach it as every solo has a beginning, and it should end in a way that makes sense, and then it's going to have the middle bits that kind of ramble around, and it should have something to say. A lot of times I'd say about some players, I hear a lot of talk, but I don't hear no conversation.
Right.
It should be a conversation. It should say something. It's not just meant to fill up 8 bars or 12 bars or 16 bars. It needs to be a part of the song. It needs to be in the spirit of the song and the style of the song. And it doesn't mean it has to be quiet and boring. It can be fiery and full of energy, but it can't be full of energy if the track is a quiet track. You know what I'm saying? And then stylistically, it needs to fit in with the era that you're playing in. You may be trying to emulate some old styles 50s blues or something. You don't want to be tapping your guitar and playing lots of notes when you want to sound like B.B. King,
Right. Can you talk about the evolution of how you learned to not necessarily just play with huge facility, but tell a story? I mean, was that with Baby, you think, or did that develop like more late in the
Well, I did. I was what in those days we called the lead guitar player in that band, so I took all the solos. I was the only soloist, so I just had to play solos all night long, night after night after night.
Wow.
And
what was that like?
So well, it's a challenge, I mean, because you try to vary the tone of your guitar, you try to vary the sound of it, and not play the same solo over and over again. You know what I mean?
You never play the same solo once.
You can't play the same thing once.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? But I mean, at that age, it was a quartet, straight ahead rock. I mean, you were.
Yeah.
That's a lot of imagination there. But you feel like that experience, even sort of almost by osmosis, it taught you to be unique in your.
Well, it helped because a lot of times what you're trying to avoid as a soloist is what I call painting yourself into a corner. Where you play and you get to this point and you can't get out of it. You can't like gracefully end it and it all just kind of falls to shit.
Yeah, right.
So and you hear guys that are very good at that. Stevie Ray Vaughan never did that to himself. I would hear him play solos night after night, maybe 3 rounds of 12 bar or 4 rounds of 12 bar, and he never got into an uncomfortable situation where he couldn't gracefully get out of it.
What did that mean? Did you pick up on the fact that he was breathing properly? That he was, what were the things that intrinsically he was giving off just from a heart and body point of view that you took to you?
Well, a lot of it is experience. You remember some of the mistakes you may have made before, where you went down this one path and there was like a dead end at the end of it.
And you couldn't turn around.
Couldn't turn around.
You just kept bumping into it.
You had to back all the way out.
Did you? Can you talk about some of the? Did you get to see before the Crusaders, the Jazz Crusaders? They were the Nighthawks. Did you ever get the chance to see any of those bands playing? Essentially, I don't want to. There was no word in the lexicon for more R&B, more soul. What were those bands that had an impression on you that came out of Texas?
No, but when I was a kid up there where I was, there was nothing. I didn't see any of those guys. There was very seldom anywhere to go see a concert. There was no people playing around there of any stature.
Well, what about tell me about Johnny Lee Schell's going to see maybe possibly just walking backwards into a Native American tribal musical thing. I mean that's Native American country out there.
No, my first encounter with someone who was basically a musical hero of mine was a concert just north of Albuquerque. It was before I played Baby, and I was in a local hippie band there, kind of a blues band. And we opened the show. We opened this outdoor show, and then B.B. King was the closer. So, 4 or 5 bands later, I'm standing backstage, and B.B. comes off stage, and it's kind of hot that day. He comes off stage, and I've never met him before, and he takes off his guitar and hands it to me and says, "Here, hold this." And he wanted to take his jacket off. And so I'm standing there, I'm this dumb hippie kid, maybe 21 years old, and I'm looking at Lucille, and BB's taking his jacket off, and he says, "Thank you very much," and he takes it and walks away. And that was my first encounter with someone who I really, truly admired, and admired until the day he died. Unfortunately, got to play on his last album he made before he passed on, but
how did you? What's funny is I'm curious about how you actually connected with him again after that serendipitous experience.
Well, in about 1984, 85, I was playing in Bonnie Raitt's band, and we were riding through the night on a tour bus somewhere in Tennessee, and the driver yells back, "Hey, B.B. King's bus is on the highway about 5 miles in front of us. They're going the same direction. They want to pull off on the side of the road." This is like about 2 in the morning, okay? And he wants to have a little get-together. So we pulled off at this kind of picnic table, the roadside stop, rest stop, whatever. And these 2 bands get out and just get to know each other for about half an hour standing by the side of the highway. And I have a picture from that night. It's on my workbench right now, BB and I. And then later on, I played on an album of duets he did. It's called Deuces Wild. And then when he was going to make this last album of his, I was just lucky enough that the producer, T-Bone Burnett, called me up and asked me to come and play, which I did. I played on the entire album. Me and Dr. John, Jim Keltner.
What a great crew of old. I mean, Keltner, the jazz snob that he was, unbelievable. It still is in some ways, but that, I mean,
yeah, he comes and play. He's come and played at my little studio over here. He and I got to know each other in about 1978 or so.
How did you connect with? Was Keltner on tour with Foray or Dylan? How did you connect with him?
I'm sorry.
I was just curious when you. 78.
We played it. We played on the first Ian McLagan's first solo album.
Wow.
He and I were session players on that.
Can you tell? Was Keltner? Because I want to hear this. I want to hear this because a lot of times, again, Keltner, you guys were not exactly spring. I mean, you weren't rookies at that point, but Keltner always has those sunglasses on, and sometimes he'll tell the producer, "Hey, move that baffle. I want to see that guitar player's hands. I want to see what he's doing." Well, tell me about how did you and Keltner connect? Like really connect musically?
We do, and I always make it a point to be very near him, physically speaking.
Mm-hmm.
When we're doing a session, I want to be able to watch him play. I want him to be able to see me, and I want to be able to possibly give him a signal or have a signal from him, a visual signal in the middle of a song, all those kinds of things.
Johnny Lee, I'm doing a film documentary on Stan Getz, and the producer I'm working with, we've been tossing around this idea of a documentary. This is not the name of the documentary, but it's basically the death of is rock and roll dead. And what I mean by that is the idea, is there longevity for younger cats? I'm not talking about Finnegan or, Robbie Krieger or, people or Journey or Steve Miller, who grew up at a time with a commerce-based record industry where you had individuality carved out on albums. You could tell who you were. You had freeform radio. For younger cats today, is longevity in music possible, and if so, how?
I think it is. Obviously, rock and roll, or as we knew it, or as as we think of it as traditional rock and roll, like Chuck Berry and the Rolling Stones and all that kind of stuff, is sort of a historical artifact that we all love and revere and still play. But the newer, I guess I don't really pay that much attention to who might be considered to be
well, that's what I'm saying.
The standard bearer of rock and roll at the moment. Someone who's, say, for example, under the age of 25 or so. Mostly those really good guitar players who come up who are young like that are going to be playing blues. And like Joe Bonamassa or those kind of,
Right. And listen, I am not somebody who's
16, 18 years old.
Yeah, I mean, there's like certain bands that you hear that I'm not even that familiar with their music, but it's just the propensity of individuality. That's the other part of it is why can't, well, I mean, I just, to me, when you go back and listen to certain records, you can tell by the individual style of the player who's playing on the record, and I don't hear that kind of individuality.
You don't have to hear more than a note or two of B.B. King to know it.
Exactly. Exactly. And so
or same goes for lots of other guitar players we could name. And so I guess that's partly to do with being familiar with them for so long and having heard them, but I think there's a little more to it than that. They sound more individual. In other words, their instrument, their personality comes out through their instrument. And I guess some of these younger players, I would just have to hazard a guess, maybe they sort of, in a way, haven't figured out who they are. They're trying to be this guy one week and then another guy one week, and they don't have a beat on that individualistic thing we're talking about. They just think they have to be too many things, and then they just become like a jack of all trades and a master of none.
Well, so I mean, this is what Rick Marotta. I don't know if you ever worked with Rick before, but he's like
I know him.
Right,
I have just met him.
Right, he said I watch. He's talking about drummers specifically. I want you to relate this to younger cats who come in the studio. He said I watch some guys play. He said guys are learning how to play drums now off of parts that are written on a drum machine. It's a completely different approach to school. I watch some guys play in some bands that you would think are drum machines, and then you see them play live, and they've got drum machine parts going, which I like very much. He says they have drummers playing to the machine. Did you see Did you see a? My question, just for drummers, what was the impact that you saw specifically, maybe 10, 15 years out now in the present day, as to when the drum machine came in? Because like cats like Brown Nagel, Keltner, the list goes on and on. Those cats, they would hear stuff on the radio when they were younger, and you couldn't hit the rewind button. There was a lot of autodidactic stuff, but eventually you took what you heard, you internalized, and then you developed your own personality, like you just were saying. And now today, I mean, what is the impact of the drum machine had on individuality as it relates to, I mean, that to me was so revealing and legit, where you're like, oh, that's definitely a machine. And then you look and it's a dude playing machine parts.
Well, if you hear a lot of the pop hits that you're going to be hearing now, like Beyonce and, Lady Gaga and all that sort of stuff, they're going to have that sort of disco-like, 4 on the floor a lot of times.
Absolutely.
With the kick drum, an enhanced sort of electronic snare that goes along with the real snare. It's just become so prevalent, and that's the way they make hits nowadays. They build tracks. A lot of the producers the artist will work with several different producers. I'm talking about the Lady Gagas and the Beyoncés. There'll be several different producers, and each producer will often build a track for them before they'll get have a meeting with them, have them like the song and want to do the song and figure out a key that the song's going to be in, then the producer will go away and build the track, and then the singer will, the star of the show, will come in and just sing along to it. And that's sort of one way that a lot of people are working in the studio these days. So most of these songs are done to a click track. You know, there's no give and take, and but that's the sort of music that a lot of our audience today is used to hearing. So in a way, you can't blame these drummers, because they're trying to emulate success, and the biggest success that they're hearing of these giant hits all have this electronic. Some portion of the drums are electronically triggered.
What can you go back to this simulated snare drum you were talking about, additional to the snare drum?
Well, if you're playing, oftentimes they'll just, if they're building a track, these producers, they'll oftentimes just put down an electric, you know, like a drum machine track, and then the drummer and maybe the bass player and a keyboard player will all come along and play to that, and then he'll just mix in. I mean, that track could disappear later, or portions of it can be used to enhance the power of the rhythm track and make it sound what we would call in general more modern. You know,
right.
We're used to hearing
right.
snares that sound like firecrackers going off, and you know.
Yeah, it's just more histrionics. The other thing is in the Schell, in your dojo. I mean, how do you that's the other thing that's missing with. I mean, we're talking about pop music. When I think of, I was born in 1978, and you go back to pop music from 75, and you know, you listen to Steely Dan or the Doobie Brothers or anybody. It was human hearts, and there was a lot of dynamics, even in pop music. And I don't.
Yeah, and
what happened?
What we're talking about basically is what we grew up hearing is what I refer to as roots-based music. You know, it's based on a musical root of gospel or blues. You know, it's going back in time, and although it was like the Rolling Stones were considered totally modern in '78 or whenever that was, they were still playing roots-based music. They were listening to older blues guys and like Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf, and that's where they sort of cut their teeth. You know, they had a great reverence for that music and still do. But
and no, what you were saying is, so that was roots, and today we're totally in the digital modern era, right? There's no
a lot of younger musicians today don't have any historical reference. You know, they don't go back in time far. If they do, they don't go back far enough to appreciate where the music came from. And for me, that is just a sort of vacuum that they think it started with. You know, it started in the '90s or something.
No, I've been talking about it. It's almost like you've been listening to my interviews, because they're like in jazz, there was a rebirth of quote unquote acid jazz, which was really boogaloo jazz, and that was in the '90s. And so, if you were talking to younger cats that were saying, because I think what you said before is revelatory and the truth, in that you can't blame younger drummers for trying to emulate success. And all I know is
they know that if they're going to get a gig, they're probably going to have to play along with the drum machine.
I would argue, and I agree with you completely, is that it was that, oh, what's the use kind of mentality of the Spencer Drydens from Jefferson Airplane. I'm not even talking about drummers. It's just the idea of that whole movement. San Francisco, it was happening all over the place, where it was like, you know, please play this piece of music because it's popular and it will resonate with the audiences and it's going to go over really well. And the artist basically said, "What the heck? What's it to me? I don't want. I want to play what feels good. I want to play something different." And it's sort of like this idea of saying, "What is success? What is individuality?" I mean, I know you have to sing for your supper, but at a certain point, I think the only way vocabulary in music can grow is if a lot of cats, a majority of them, start to shed this idea of monetary success as opposed to.
It's there's still going to be some nonconformists who come along, some rebels who want to do it their way, and we applaud that very loudly.
The problem is they're going to be starving geniuses, right?
They may have to have a little job on the side, but what we try to do here is play something that sounds good to us, something that we really love and think is good, and hope that there will be some people out there who think the same way.
Before I let you go, can you just talk about some of the projects that you're working on, and also the most inspirational thing that you have heard from one of these younger nonconformists in 2017?
Well, I have a studio here out behind my house, and we do a lot of recording here. We got 2 blues albums of the year, one was Trampled Underfoot, one was Curtis Salgado, both of which Tony Bronigal produced.
Wow.
And I acted mostly in recording engineer capacity, for which I have engineered 1 Grammy Award-winning album. It was a folk album, the guy playing a banjo and singing.
Who was it?
It was Loudon Wainwright III.
What year was that?
High, Wide, and Handsome. It's High, Wide, and Handsome. It's called the Charlie Poole Project. It won Best Traditional Folk Album of 2009.
Wow.
And I was a recording engineer on that. And so I took great pride in that, because the engineers don't want musicians. They pretty much look down on musicians being engineers, and as we as musicians would look down on engineers trying to be musicians. kind of like an actor trying to become a singer, or a singer trying to become an actor. There's sort of this invisible fence that they kind of try to draw in there.
Well, what about
keep you out.
Well, tell me about how Belushi straddles that line between actor and musician.
Well, he's an actor, but he's not a musician.
Right, but
he's an actor.
So how did you tell me about
an actor who gets on stage and acts the role of a musician.
Explain what that. Okay, break that down for the peeps out there.
Well, he knows he's not a musician, and he's not trying to become a musician. He relies on us to do all the musical stuff and tell him what to do. And so basically he's given a script and he follows that.
How did you know his brother John?
No, I only met him once.
Those cats, can you just talk about the idea of when you worked for, according to Jim, for instance, I mean, when you were kind of writing music for it, was it him coming and saying, this is like kind of like the kind of scene it's going to be, this is the feel we want, and that's how you would try to write? Can you talk about how you collaborate?
Well, basically we talked to him and the directors and producers, and they said, we just want some straight blues, we're just going to have 3 and 4 second cues going in and out of commercials. They don't have to be elaborate, they're all going to fade. So what we did was we would write 2 or 3 instrumentals, and we would record, let's say, for example, we would record a version with the sax soloing all the way through. We would record a version with the guitar soloing all the way through. We would record a version with the keyboard soloing all the way through. And then I would chop all those up into cues, and we would have this vast cue library at the beginning of each season. And then we just use our our digital workstations to drag the cues into where they belonged with the picture. And that was probably the easiest job I ever had. If people knew how easy it was, they'd probably want to kill me.
They'd want your salary back. No, this is
they'd want my job.
Yeah, let me ask you.
I wasn't getting paid all that much money.
No, but you know what though? I mean, what? Tell me about, if at any, did you ever? You were clearly a hippie, and you before baby, but what was your thoughts? Did you ever get to see the Mahavishnu Orchestra, and what was McLaughlin's impact? Not even on your playing, but just what did you think when you? Because he's one of those guys that you're like, oh, he's backing himself into a corner, and then somehow he'd find his way out of it.
No. I had absolutely no contact with him or any of his music. I don't know if I ever even heard him play, even on a record. I don't think I did. That was probably so foreign to me that I probably just couldn't even understand it. So,
Johnny Lee Schell. I mean, dude, listen, I came out with, I had all 5 pitches working for strikes today, but I think you had a couple extra base hits. You were on fire today, man.
Oh, good. Good.
But listen,
I always like to earn my keep on the team.
Oh man, I mean, you were hitting line drives all over the place. But listen, the thing is, when I get out to Southern Cal, I'm going to be doing a Hunter S. Thompson journalistic trip out there in a month or so. And if you're around, I'd love to stop by the studio, maybe do part 2 with you.
That'd be excellent. Come on over. We'll get drunk and be somebody.
Hey, that sounds like a great plan, Johnny Lee. I'll tell you, keep getting in that batting cage, man. You're hitting line drives everywhere, man.
Okie dokie. I appreciate it, Jake. You have a great day, buddy.
All right, bud. I'll talk to you. I'll get you a copy of this too, all right?
Okay. Stay in touch with me.
Cheers, man. Later.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Amazing musician and engineer, Johnny Lee Schell, and even a better human being. We'll be right back on the other side of the break with Steve Knopper.